It was a very Mayberry RFD kind of childhood. Everyone knew my grandparents, my parents, my aunts and uncles, and so they knew me. And it was just a very supportive, comfortable community to grow up in. It was conversations oftentimes around issues that were coming up in the town. There were decisions that community people had to make, and those kinds of decisions, conversations happened, in a lot of places throughout the town and ultimately resolved themselves at town meeting. And that's really sort of this iconic Vermont place where people come together, share views, share a meal, eventually find their way to vote on an issue. Not everybody leaves satisfied. Nevertheless, it's a model for how a society practices that rule of treat others the way that you would like to be treated. My grandparents and my parents were very active in civic life. And so they were always at the polls. And I remember growing up and they had a framed picture of JFK on the wall with, his handwritten thanks to them for all of their support and all of that. And it was a thing of pride for them that they helped the president. My background and upbringing was to really imprint on me the importance of volunteerism, civic duty, doing your share. And so I also was educated by the Sisters of Mercy in Middlebury. And so they were very committed to education, to social justice. And so again, those were early role models for me. So when I got to college, and I was a first generation college-bound student, I naturally found myself drawn to political science. And so that preparation, I would say, helped me eventually to connect to a graduate program for public administration and public policy, because I wanted to be involved in public life through civic connections with people and government. So that eventually led me to find my place connecting business community with policy making, which eventually led me, years later to the roundtable. And it was in that context where I really started to connect business leaders, people who like to solve problems, to connect them to state policies that were aimed at solving complex issues for the state. And that's really where my formation, if you will, the trajectory of all of that started. So when we think about this small state of 630,000 people, but back then it was much smaller, but nevertheless, we produced tremendous political thinkers and leaders who found their way to Washington and really made an impression on the country with their wisdom and their counsel. And so that's a point of pride I think we have as a state. Our natural beauty as a state is protected by these laws that we have created that place a very high value on our natural resources. And so again, that policy framework that I keep going back to, what you value, you protect. And so that is something that Vermont has been very active in throughout the course of our history, but also human rights, civil unions, marriage equality. Those are things that Vermonters have been very outspoken with, in some cases before the rest of the country was ready to do that as well. Let the Vermonters lead. Well, I love our state motto, freedom and unity. It's not freedom or unity. Freedom may be unity. It's freedom and unity. And the unity part is just, it has to be a clarion call for the rest of the country. I don't think people are really paying enough attention to. I don't believe they understand how very quickly we can slip from being a democracy to being a former democracy. Vermont has gone through its transformation from being a Republican state to being a Democratic state. And so we understand that is sort of an organic process as people move across borders and bring new ideas and all of that. That can happen, but it happened in a relatively turbulence-free way. And so as a country, we should be able to make those transitions well without the risk of life and limb or violence. Democracy is fragile. And if you don't nurture it and invest in it and cultivate it and make sure that generations of people understand it, then there will be complacency and people will not be ready to fight for it. I think what Vermont can learn is that we are exceptional in some ways, but we're not exceptional in every way. And so it's important for Vermonters to get out of Vermont and go see something different and live outside the state to really understand how, our country has come to be. Come back to Vermont and bring back those ideas that we can benefit from, that can make us a better state. How can we welcome first Americans? How can we be more welcoming to people of color? How do we actively pursue creating those kinds of communities and places that people desire to be, not because they're fleeing a pandemic or they're climate refugees, but because it is the nature of the place that is so appealing to them. That is something that I think we can learn from looking at other places around the country that have done it successfully. The things that bind us together as Americans is there's a creativity and an entrepreneurial spirit in the country that I think came here with the very first people who landed on these shores and said, I'm escaping that and I want to build something new here. So there's that kind of energy, and people have numerous stories that they can point to that say, I had an idea and I pursued it and I was able to create this wonderful new life for myself or this company, et cetera. Fundamentally, though, I think the things that really binds us together is that we really, all of us, wherever you look, in whatever state, big city, rural places, the things that bind us together are that we really want the same things for our children. We want them to be healthy and living in a safe community. We want them to have as much education as they can possibly get. We want them to live free of fear and live in a just society. We want them to be healthy and live productive lives and given the same kind of opportunity as anyone else. We should also want the same things for each other's children. So if we want these for our children, we should want them for each other's children as well. I think it would be a productive and interesting exercise to share these sets of questions around the country, because you will get different perspectives. And then the opportunity is to find where there might be a thread that you can pull through everything. There must be a single thread that you can pull through that would be worth building on. Really, I want to see a purple America. We are so brilliantly blue and red right now that we can't seem to find our way to the middle. Our country is so polarized right now. And Vermont continues to be a place where we can disagree over issues, but we have been able to contain our decorum in those conversations. I do get concerned that I see it kind of starting to fray a little bit, which makes me all the more interested in education as a tool to help people understand the obligation they have to participate in those conversations, all about the governance of our state and our country. It's shocking how that type of education, a civics education, has been lost to generations of people. So I am proud of Vermont being able, through these town meeting forums and in other forums that larger places don't have, but to bring community together and talk about the issues that affect us directly and find a way through them.